Good evening. I'd like to call the study session for September the 26th, 2022 for the City of North Augusta to order. And before I turn it over to Mr. Clifford, just two things I want to reiterate for folks. If you're out there watching this live stream or will be watching it later, this is a little different. Two things in particular will be different this year. As you notice, we are having our initial budget discussion is being done in council chamber so we can live stream it. In the past, we've been doing it in the council boardroom, but we can't live stream that. So council, as you know, have been very focused on communicating better with citizens, and we think it's very important that citizens will be able to observe the budget planning session that we're having tonight, as well as in the past, on our first reading on October the 17th, we normally have always given 30 minutes. We're going to extend that to 1 hour to allow more ample time for citizens who have questions to be able to come forward. So just continuing of this council focusing on communicating and giving citizens a voice. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to our City Administrator, Mr. Jim Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. So what I'd like to do, if I could, is go through an abbreviated look through our next week's agenda. And after we finish that, we'll move right into the budget portion of our study session. So starting off under item number 5, under unfinished business, under planning and development, which is ordinance number 2022-15 to amend the zoning map of the City of North Augusta, South Carolina by rezoning plus or minus 0.52 acres of land owned by Hardy Land LLC, Aiken County tax parcels 005-19-06-006 from PD to R5 mixed residential ordinance, second reading. I know Tommy talked to you at length about this in the previous council meeting and also study session, so I have no new information to provide on this particular item unless there are any questions from council. Next is an item that Kelly Zier can certainly talk to better than I can, which is under new business for elections, ordinance number 2022-16, complying with sections 10-1 and 10-2 of the Code of Laws of North Augusta, South Carolina, by setting the dates for municipal party primaries, conventions, and partisan general election, times for filing of nominating petitions, certification of candidates by parties, and certification of candidates by Municipal Election Commission. Ordinance first reading, and I believe you have an updated copy there in front of you today that was distributed by the city clerk, which was not part of the packet.
This is just a primary, right? Nothing to do with the general. This is general. Okay.
Yeah, I think this sets it up, all of it, and basically all of this information, the dates are just plugged in based upon what the state statutes require as far as time for filing and all of that.
But we don't list the general election date in here. That's always in.
No, because the general election date's set.
Set. I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm with you. Okay. Thank you.
Again, that's I hate to say a routine action, but it is something that's required prior to any election season in the year prior. And so that's why that's on the agenda based on our city attorney's recommendation for the next council meeting. Next item I have is item number 7 under public safety, resolution number 2022-45, resolution authorizing the City of North Augusta to enter into a contract for the construction manager at risk procurement method for the public safety headquarters building and authorize staff to develop a guaranteed maximum price with a company as yet to be determined. So we're going through our evaluation process now. We've conducted in-person interviews of 5 firms. And we will be drafting this resolution this week once we have a legally sufficient selection, and that'll come out to the council on Friday through the packet of which of the 5 firms would be selected at that time. Subject to any of your questions on that item. Last but not least, item number 8 under Public Services Department, resolution number 2022-46. A resolution authorizing the City of North Augusta to enter into a contract for materials recycling facility equipment with company to be determined, not to exceed to be determined amount. So James is going to be opening sealed bids from a number of companies, I believe tomorrow, and once that has been completed, we'll go ahead and firm up this resolution and have it here before council. Any questions from council on our proposed agenda?
And I'm sorry, Jim, to go back to the, wait a minute, number 6. Oh, and not that I'm running this, I mean, it's not affecting me, but that December 12th, because I thought we used to do that to January 1st, that you filed to run for.
No, I filed, we filed, 2 years ago we filed.
No, I know
last
us,
year,
but this is saying December 12th, right?
Yeah, that's why we did it.
Huh?
We filed in December last year.
Did we not? I always thought it was 1st
18
of
months.
January.
Didn't we?
Because I remember thinking, oh my gosh,
We did it.
we
didn't
did.
we?
I know we did it, but
Oh,
was it
okay.
that date?
Oh,
In
that-
December? Okay, I just don't remember that. Yeah, you had to January. It's always been January.
We were eager beavers.
Well, I mean, I don't think that matters. You got to file regardless, but I know it's been January 1st through January 8th. That's what it's always been.
We'll look back and check
Yeah,
on
look
the
back,
dates
check
to make
on
sure.
that for my memory.
They're all, you start from the date of the election and you work yourself back to these different things.
Yeah, I know that, but I tell you, I've never seen it in December.
Councilwoman, we'll go ahead and double check those
Yeah,
dates.
I mean, that's okay. It's, like I said, there's no heat off my back, but I just want to.
Are you sure you properly qualified on
I quit. I'm gone.
Oh, gosh.
Please let me know that, just for my mind.
Maybe it was a leap, maybe that was a leap year. Maybe that was a leap year.
Of course, look at the two are talking, the ages of us too, so. I know, I'm sure it was January, because I remember thinking you got after.
Okay. Let's do what I'm told. I think we're good, Mr. Clever. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Rare. All right, and then Ricky, if I can get you to go ahead and put up our initial slide. Thank you. So for mayor and council and for our citizens in the audience and watching at home, what I did today with our staff was put together an overview, if you will, of the major drivers on our budget in fiscal year 2023. Try to answer some of those questions ahead of time and save you the deep dive into each line of the budget, and I'll talk to you big picture about what we're trying to accomplish, what those impacts are, and then after that, we'll be prepared to receive any of your questions, or if you have questions throughout the presentation, I'll do my best to answer them at that point in time. So next slide, please. So this is the purpose of the briefing today, is to really update you and the council and the citizens on the balanced budget that I have proposed here today. And so to refresh our citizens' memories, there are a couple different forms of how this works in government. So sometimes the city administrator or city manager can bring an unbalanced budget to a council where the council can make decisions about what comes off. But the way our ordinance is written, I'm required to present to you a balanced budget option. And so that's what you have here today. Next slide. So I would like to talk a little bit about what we think are some of the primary budget drivers here for fiscal year 23. And I'll start off with the largest, which is really the 18% increase in PBA insurance costs to all local governments here in South Carolina. This is an action that was fought by MASC through the legislature to try to attempt to forestall this and have this paid at the state level. They were not successful in their endeavors, and so every city and county municipality in South Carolina now has to deal with this 18% increase in PBA costs. What that means to the city of North Augusta, in essence, is an unforecasted bill of $296,000 in our general fund, or across all funds as we go forward on this, which is equivalent to a little over roughly 2.5 mils going forward on this. Another budget driver we have is I asked our finance director to increase our budgeting for unleaded and diesel fuel costs. We came right at our proposed costs this past year. We're right on the line. That doesn't give us a lot of wiggle room, if you will, for cost variations. And I think as you see right now, even though unleaded has come down somewhat, diesel fuel has not appreciably declined. And a large portion of our budget is dealing with diesel for our sanitation vehicles and some other heavy equipment that we have. And then lastly, based on the input that we had from the Archer study, which recommended a 9.8% COLA increase for our city personnel, which is roughly analogous to the consumer price index of 9.1% this summer. That was going to be a pretty significant impact on the budget, and I could not figure out a way to, quite frankly, do that. And so based on the COLA that the council had given last year, 4%, asked for another 4% COLA for our employees going forward into the budget, because we can make that fit. And I think that gives us a significant move forward and understanding we may have other COLAs in years to come. And lastly, for these budget drivers, these three things that are listed here on the slide cut across multiple budgets. So the general fund, the sanitation fund, the stormwater utility fund, and the utility O&M fund, because we have personnel across all of those funds, as well as fuel costs associated with all of those funds. So when we talk about the PIBA hit, if you will, to the budget, it's not just across the general fund. It interweaves all of the budgets that are kind of our operating budgets here in our budget lines.
Jim, just for the sake of those listening and him here, could you just explain the PIBA thing, what that means and what that is?
J.D. McCauley is going to be happy to explain that to you, or Councilman Toole.
Good evening. The 18% increase is for the employer share of the premium for health, dental, vision, and so that's really where the increase comes in. We had, for 2022, we had $1.6 million that we were paying for premiums, and then projected if everyone elects the same coverage, which open enrollment's in October, so we have a variable there of who's going to self-select out if we have, due to some of the changes. But forecasted for 2023 would be 1.9 million. That's where the delta comes in for what we're projecting is 296,000. That's where we get that number from.
Thank you, J.D. Any other questions on the slide?
Do we think we've upped enough for the gas? I mean, they're just $3. Upped enough for the gas, $3.50, because we only went up 25 cents.
We did a large cost increase last year into this fiscal year 22 budget. And so what we're seeing is we were forecasting and we looked at where our numbers hit. Those numbers were pretty close to that target. And so what we're seeing right now is we're getting some cost savings, as you typically do, where you have the highest costs is for fuel in the summertime. And so based on what we're seeing for our fuel forecasts, we felt that was an adequate move. We could always budget for additional fuel costs, but that's going to squeeze other things within the budget, or you're going to have to allow for a greater millage increase.
Jim, the COLA raise, I'm assuming the 9.8 was recommended because of inflation, and I understand we're working in budget constraints. I just wanted to point out that's probably why they recommended so much, but with our budget, we're kind of,
Councilman, I would say that I think the Archer study was very much in line with what they call the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which is a federal number that's published every month, and those numbers are fairly close. What I'm hearing, at least through my friends in the federal government, that the federal government is looking to do somewhere in the vicinity of 4.5 or 4.6% COLA as their request going into the next fiscal year at the federal level. And so that helped kind of inform where we were operating within our town. Next slide. So what I would like to highlight with this budget, we're trying to get after a couple of things. One, based on what you're seeing here with the growth in the city, and some of our inspector requirements. The Department of Public Works had asked for an erosion control inspector, which has a lot to do with stormwater detention ponds and retention ponds associated with developments. So Tom Zeser, our engineer, had requested that as a personnel ad this year, and so we figured we could make that fit. We also determined that we could do a mid-year, a 1 July start for an additional planning and development code enforcement officer. And I believe that that would be a necessary add regardless. But we're also having some nascent conversations now about parking enforcement. And so moving that parking enforcement out of public safety and into an administrative role. And this would be one of the personnel that could potentially help us in that aspect. Lastly, we'd be adding 2 part-timers to PRT to help take some of the load off. We've been burning the candle at both ends for some of our full-time employees between weekday and weekend work, and so Rick had asked for some additional assistance there within PRT, and so we're able to make room for 2 part-timers within PRT. Next slide.
Hold up,
Ma'am.
Jim. On employees, I noticed a security person at Riverview Park got denied.
I'll talk that on a future
So
slide.
Don't worry about it.
Well, I'll address
We're
it.
going to address it.
Okay,
later.
okay,
He'll
all
address
right,
it.
okay.
So there you go. Requests have been
There
not
we go.
requests have been not funded.
Y'all gotta move.
I'll remove the PRT Center Coordinator that actually, Rick and I had talked about that earlier, but did not make it into a budget submission, so that's disregard. The next one under there is a PRT Security Guard that Rick had talked about, providing security at a couple different venues. You know, our solution or strategy for that is to cook that cost into the cost of the tournaments and have an off-duty police officer be built into that cost, which is a lot more cost-effective than pulling in another full-time employee, into the mix.
Let me just say that I think that's one thing we all agree with on council, and that was when we talked to staff as far as Rick and PRT, that was one constant y'all kept talking about. And, it's not 100% probably ideally what we need, but I think it's a good start. And if we can bake it into the cost, I think it'll help you a lot. Do you agree? Okay.
Yeah, so that cost would largely be borne by the outside organizations that come here and schedule tournaments, as opposed to the, homeowning, citizens of the town.
And I'm gonna tell y'all, that needs to be done, because I personally was over there one Sunday in a big, almost fight, and I had to get in there involved. But we did not have a policeman there. And I don't know, we called and nothing against the police, but no one, while I was there, ever came. So when those tournaments go on, people lose their minds. And they fight. This was a fist fight getting ready to happen. So I'm telling you, we have got to have somebody there, because it builds up all during the day with those tournaments.
We're going to do it. We're doing it.
All right.
We know. She broke her nails and everything.
All right. The next one that we had requests from staff but did not fund also was in Department of Public Works, was Streets and Drains Supervisor underneath the Superintendent. We were able to add 1 person to Streets and Drains in the last 2 years, and so we didn't feel this was the time to be able to add that to this budget, and maybe something we do in the future. Next slide, please. So under personnel changes, what I would say is this is not an all-inclusive list, but I would like to highlight a couple things that were, I think, of note and of interest to a number of our council members. So one is the public safety firefighters. So last year we were able to actually get them on grade, which we hadn't been doing previously. And so again, as we talked about last year, this was going to be an iterative move to move our firefighters into a better pay band. So this is the first movement that we talked about from last year, which is taking them from grade 3 to grade 4. And so that's across all our firefighters. The other thing that we're doing is we're going to mirror what we see in a lot of other municipalities and counties, which is our dispatchers. So currently all of our dispatchers are at the same pay scale, the same pay grade. And so we're going to move to a junior and a senior dispatcher. The senior dispatcher will be a higher pay grade than the junior dispatcher, and that will cut across all 4 shifts. So essentially what you'll have is 4 junior and then 4 senior dispatchers. It doesn't change the number of dispatchers, it just changed the pay grade for 4 of them. And then lastly, under James's department, we're upgrading and increasing the grade not total number of personnel, but the pay band because of the competitive nature of working utilities right now, of moving utility worker 2s from grade 6 to grade 9.
Jim, what's the grade on the senior and junior dispatcher?
I'll pull it open, but I think it might be a 12 and a 10 or...
It's something like that. I don't have that information in front of me, but it's got to
Okay,
be.
thank you.
He might have it.
Thank you.
Yeah, the current grade is 9, and the senior would be a 10, so 9 out of 10.
And Jim or Chief, this doesn't really have anything to do with this budget, but it's something to look at going forward. You know, I notice we're getting more firefighters than public safety officers. Have we reached a point where public safety is ineffective? Or are we going to have to look at having a separate fire department and police department, or Chief, or are we still good with public safety?
I'll take a stab at that, and then Chief will probably have a more informed opinion. I think what you could see across the state, Councilman, is that there have been a number of public safety models that have now transitioned into pure police and fire. I think we saw that in the city of Casey. We're seeing that in North Myrtle Beach. There are still some public safety models here within the state, the city of Aiken being a notable sister city that has that kind of setup. Could it happen in the future? I think it could, but we have not done the kind of the cost-benefit analysis of the cost to establish a pure fire department versus public safety. So that's my answer on it. I don't know if Chief has anything he'd like to add.
It's basically what I was going to say, Mr. President. I mean, obviously it works. It's working here. It works in other areas. But it's a tremendous cost when you start separating police and fire. And the cost analysis would have to be done to show you on paper.
Right, and that's why, I've just noticed, like, the firefighters, we're seeing more and more of those spots opening up, and I know we've looked at, I know we've had conversations here about looking for our next, fire station, things like that. So it's just something that's in the back of my mind, but I'm sure y'all will come to us at whatever point that is and say, hey, we need to look at it this way.
Yes, sir.
I think regardless, Councilman, I think if there was a discussion to bifurcate those two functions, that there would be a price tag associated with it, and I just don't know what that would be at this point in time. So what I also want to talk about here under personnel changes, because this will affect our personnel, really is the healthcare cost shared by the employees. So as we're trying to absorb this almost $300,000 hit from PIBA onto the employer, some of this is going to be absorbed through efficiencies by the staff. Some of this is going to be passed on to citizens, and some of it's going to be borne by the employees themselves. So going through this model, we're going to save by the city $125,000 total on removing the employer subsidies for the premium for dental, and we're also going to reduce the subsidy for our employee-only plans from 100% to 75%, which means in layman's terms, if you are an employee with dependents, with a spouse, with children, you're already paying a certain rate for your health care through the city. For the single payers, folks that don't have any dependents, they're paying $0 because the city fully pays for their subsidy, if you will. And so when we were looking at how to absorb this PIBA cost, that's one way we do this, and understanding that the COLA, 4% more than offsets the costs that are borne by the employees, but there are, depending on which employee you are, depends on the level of cost offset that you have, depending on the healthcare selections that you've made. And JD is certainly prepared to talk through a little more of the specifics, but this is a way we're trying to not just pass costs directly to the citizens, but also try to do our due diligence. And what we're proposing here is in line with most other municipalities, and quite frankly, we're still providing a higher level of healthcare support through the city of North Augusta than most of our sister communities based on this, even after this passes if it's approved by council. Subject to any questions on this slide, I'll move to the next slide. What I'd like to talk about is what we're going to be doing within this budget. So part of this is we're adding a $25,000 line into planning and development for the purposes of downtown. we may end up using additional funding down the line between either the Riverfront Central Core or through ARPA, because $25,000 really just buys you a whole bunch of banners, or actually you shouldn't even say a bunch of banners, buys you some banners. But for the kind of improvements we're trying to do in our downtown, $25,000 a year isn't going to cut it. It'll certainly give us some maintenance, but it'll at least be a start, and we'd like to at least take on this and potentially increase from there. Another thing that we're adding on here is a traffic study for 5 Notch. We have a number of different traffic studies that we juggled to see what we could fit in the budget this year, but we focused on 5 Notch as we've had a lot of interest from our council and from our citizens about sidewalks near Mossy Creek Elementary, through traffic ability studies, and a number of other things. In order to do any of those, we're going to need a traffic study ahead of time. So this is one way to move forward on that. Tom Zeser can probably talk this a lot more intelligently than I can, but we put a wedge in there for alleyway resurfacing. It's something we haven't done in a long time. This does touch downtown to some degree, but we'd like to be able to resurface the alleyway systems that we have here in our city, and those are most resident that go by Georgia Avenue. We have a new piece of equipment for our detention ponds, which is a remote control lawnmower, which sounds really neat, but essentially what that does is cuts down on our concerns about employee injuries or workman's comp requirements. So this is something we can automate, and we think that's going to be a good way forward. And lastly, we're making a minor increase on our employee education reimbursement fund. So last year in FY22, we set aside $5,000 for tuition reimbursement programs. I suspect we're going to come very close to that by the end of the year. And so we're going to increase this to $15,000 for the next year. And then I also have some flexibility based on the council's decision for our premium pay to use that for retention purposes, so we can backstop that if required through 23 and 24.
And have we seen employees take advantage of that reimbursement program?
We have a number of our employees that have taken advantage of it. JD can probably talk that a little more in depth than I can, but we have a number of folks that have embarked on local education initiatives, and we're seeing strong interest in that program.
It's been a good value for us.
I believe so. I think it's also a great retention tool.
Jim, I don't know if this is a you or Tom question, but on the 5 Notch traffic study, is the county or the state, can we get any funding from them to help with this? Because the city limits is a very small part of 5 Notch, and then the rest is either in the, it's a state road and it's in the county. So I didn't know if there was grants or anything that we could reach out to them to help with it.
That's a Tommy question, but I'll see if Tommy's got something for us.
I believe it was we have a grant that's available to us, so that 100,000, if my memory serves me correct, would be reimbursed 80,000.
Now, I have also, and Tom knows I've talked on this for years, that left turn at McDonald's on 5 Notch, and I had someone in my car the other day, and I said, tell me what you think this needs to be. I'm telling y'all, ask them when they do this study. The turn left, you either go straight or left. The right turn is only right. That you're sitting there through 3 and 4 red lights because the cars are coming from Knox Avenue, and so you can't make a left turn, so the people going straight are sitting there. Where if they were in that right lane, you could turn right or go straight. I'm saying that needs to be looked at. I don't know, and I think, Tom, if my memory's correct, it was something about the alignment or something years ago, but I'm telling you, that really needs to be looked at, because you're sitting at that red light. I don't know what they were thinking when they did that, but please, somebody on this study, I think that needs to be checked into.
Councilwoman, I have great faith and confidence in Tommy Paradise's ability to carry that message
Is it
going
Tommy?
into
Okay.
the
Excuse me
plans.
on that, Tommy. Oh, so if not, come out there and you and me will ride one day and look at it. Yeah, it's horrible. I'm telling you, you sit there through 3 and 4 red lights, and that is the right lane, not a car one.
Next slide, please. In my brief experience here as a city administrator, we almost always talk about the community fund, so I wanted to make sure you had that on a prominent slide for you all to look at, which is the requested amounts from a number of our nonprofit partners, and then the allocated amounts, which is in line with what we've done in previous years. So I just wanted to put this up here for some visibility for mayor and council and our community on, where some of these community funds go to.
Let me just talk about this, because I need council to help educate me on this, and I'm going to preface this, because I know, I want to make sure this comes across the right way. All these are great organizations, and I know last year, and I'm talking about public education partners, the piece that I would need to get my head around is I can go down this list from Aiken Council on Aging all the way down to the Wrecking Crew. And I know every one of those organizations, specifically what they do for our citizens in North Augusta. And the part that I can't quite tell from this application from Public Education Partners, and I know it's a great organization, a good friend of mine, Dee Baldwin, used to be a part of it. So I think they do a wonderful job for education. What I guess I can't tell from this application is this money just going into a general fund that helps all of Aiken County? Because all these other areas, I think we need to give money to organizations that help the citizens in North Augusta. So is that $3,000 for PEP, is that literally going to go to a grant at, for teacher at North Augusta High School or elementary, at Hammond Hill? That's the only thing. We can prove every one of these other ones that's the only one I'm uncertain about. So if y'all can help me with that.
Well, I got an answer, because I took myself today and checked around with principals. And I said, tell me, because I've always thought North Augusta never got their fair share of this. Okay, and now this is exact words from North Augusta High School. Not currently. They helped with sales tax referendum years ago. Now, how long ago was that, y'all, the referendum? Okay, North Augusta High School, which is school employee, was the ringleaders for getting that passed. So, and then help with musical instruments. And then I checked with North Augusta Middle. We only get money from them if we are awarded a grant. Now, they have applied for a grant, but have not received it yet. I mean, it could be they could. But I did, and that's the only two principals. I had their numbers. But that's what I was wondering, Mayor. Are we getting our fair share of what? I know 3,000 is not a lot, but
Not a lot, but it is to the Wrecking Crew.
yeah, yeah. Tell me about it. So I'm like you on that, and I have another on that. I called Rachel today because I was riding around. This little lady was standing on the streets, and I thought something was wrong with her, but it ended up she's waiting on Best Friend's bus. So I called Best Friends, and I said, when are you going to pick her up? She's been standing in this heat. Well, we got that settled. But I called Best Friends. If y'all notice, they are not on here. This is the first time in years. So I've got a call in. Not that I'm wanting to throw North Augusta's money away, but this is one thing we can offer our senior citizens. A lot of times people say, what are you doing for senior citizens? And this is something we do for our senior citizens by providing bus transportation. Like this little lady was going from Belvedere to Walmart. She'd have had to walk if she didn't. So I'm asking why, unless they've got some source of money that's come in and they don't need us.
These organizations to apply.
Yeah, but they've always applied, Mayor.
There must be a reason why they.
Yeah, that's what I said, but I'm finding out why. Because, like I tell them, but the lady's out of town that I need to talk with, so I don't want to see us lose Best Friends. I mean, I don't want them to come back and say, we're no longer going to service your citizens.
Well,
because that's a big deal.
Is it possible to get some follow-up information? I don't know who does that, whether it's Rachel or whoever, on Public Education Partners, and maybe have them specifically give us some details? Because, again, to me, if we're going to give money in $3,000 or $2,000, whatever the dollars is, with everything going on, I think it needs to be, we need to know it's being used in our citizens in North Augusta. I just don't think we're in a position financially just to help other people but our own people. Charity begins at home.
Well, right, and if you look, we have it's the Aiken County school system, but there's only really, 3 municipalities, maybe 4 in all of Aiken County. So, is Wagner, is Jackson, New Ellington, whoever, are they given to this fund, or is it just us and the county and the city of Aiken? So, yeah, if
This
that's
is a
the case-
private fund here. This is
Yeah.
citizens that got together and started this. This had nothing to do with
It's
Aiken
nothing to
County.
do with the school system.
They give to the school system. That's why it was started.
Well, but you
But
brought
part
up,
of
they
Aiken
said it
County,
was,
no. This is just
but
citizens
is it just
years
North
ago.
Augusta schools?
No, it's all Aiken County.
Right, and that's
All
what
Aiken
I'm
County.
saying. I mean,
I'll sit down with Kelly, Councilwoman, but I know in private organizations, when you do some of these things, you have the ability to put some caveats on how the money is spent. You can say, you can have this 3,000, like, here's grant funding, but the grant has to be spent in the following kind of way. So we'll dig into that and figure out if that's feasible or not, and then we'll also follow up with Lower Savannah Council of Governments, because they're the ones that coordinate the Best Friends Express.
That'd be good. Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Got a real quick question. I know Finney Center came and did a presentation to us several months ago, and I don't see them listed on here. Did they not reapply this time, or is that somewhere else in the budget for this go-around?
They typically are funded out of the stormwater fund, not out of the community funds. But again, until we actually have, let me rephrase this, until I have guidance from the council that tells me they're getting funded, we've removed them because we're not using their data for any kind of work here within the city. Their water reports are not used for our water quality within public services. And when they are funded for Columbia County and Richmond County, that a lot of times they're using that data when it comes to wastewater, which again is a county function, not necessarily a city function.
We did reach them out. We did get them contact with Chairman Bunker of Aiken County because they had not really built a relationship with them and they needed to.
No, I understand that. It was my understanding that we were using that data and part of the stormwater budget, but again, y'all, I would defer to those that know, but that was my understanding.
And one more thing on the wrecking crew, the 2,100 is that, we're not giving them cash money. It's going toward the use of the gym and the fields, correct? Is that what the 2,100 is?
We give it to them. It's in their application.
I thought it was, that would be the use of the gym center and,
No.
Miss Pat. Miss Pat.
No, I think it's just for
Well, they
purchasing
requ-
equipment and
Yeah,
whatever.
they requested 4355, and it says these funds will support and they list what it's gonna be used for. But what we're saying is we're not gonna give them 43, we're gonna give them 2,100. So in the application, they tell you how they have to use it.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying, going back to the PEP, is they say the school district, but they don't say the schools in North Augusta.
thought it was not the use of facility.
It says these
Okay.
funds will support our adaptive baseball, basketball program known as T-Rex. Our new and extremely popular North Augusta High School football clinic would become an annual event. is what it
Oh, I mean, I'm for that,
says. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what.
but I,
Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about what we are funding, which largely has to do with personnel and also with some projects and some studies. But I also wanted to put some visibility to the council on, what we're not funding in this budget and some potential options of alternate funding strategies. So we looked at with planning and development, and we had really $200,000 worth of traffic studies that we had requested, and we prioritized 5 notches this year's requirement, and then we will likely slide. There are 2 smaller studies, $50,000 apiece, into the fiscal year 24 budget under planning and development. So I think that will be where that will end up. And then for public safety, you have a number of high-cost items that are in there. So replacement for our 1981 ladder truck, service truck, a brush truck, light-duty truck. All those trucks are high-cost items. You've already funded 1 truck, which is not included in there under ARPA. But the rest of those are going to have to be funded in some kind of way because they're getting towards the end of lifespan. And so our primary strategy right now for our oldest vehicle, the ladder truck, is to pursue a FEMA grant, which will be done in the February timeframe of next year. And if barring that, we'll look at putting that into a CPST requirement. If you look across the river at Columbia County, Georgia, they're exclusively funding their fire apparatus through their version of CPST called SPLOST. And so I wanted to at least put that out there as a marker that we're going to have to put a fair number of fire trucks on that list or some other funding strategy going forward. But those cannot be paid for out of the base general fund budget that is before you today. Likewise, we're going to need to do some fire station renovations. I think that will either come out of CPSD 5. We can do some light duty modifications to Fire Station 2 to include furniture and those kinds of things, but to do the holistic, roof replacement and some of the other things that are wrong with that building, that's going to require a pretty significant plug of money, and that's likely where that will come from. We also have to upgrade our indoor range. The system that is there is antiquated. That needs to get updated. That's probably at least a $200,000 bill. So that's one of those areas where either through ARPA, through Capital Projects Fund, or a CPST outlay may be an option to fund those areas. The department also wanted to transition this year from 45 caliber to 9 millimeter, which again was not in this year's budget from a cost perspective, but that may be done in a future budget or potentially through ARPA if that's the council's guidance. And then also we're squeezing one more year out of a couple of our Chevy Tahoes. So our lower mileage vehicles, we're getting one more year out of those and scooping those through. Lastly, here on the slide under Public Services and DPW, we had a project put forward by both James and Tom to repave the operations facility. Parking lot, not just the customer parking, but where all the business is done. That's probably about a $150,000 bill. Again, I think that's likely a capital projects fund in the future, but not something we can do in this base budget through the general fund. And then last but not least on this slide is about an $8,000 floor scrubber for the facility that you're in here to do all the cleaning on the specialty floors. So I just wanted to give you some I'm not expecting action on this per se. If you have any guidance you want to give me in this forum, that's fine. But just wanted you to be aware of there were a lot of staff requests out there that we're not going to fund in the base budget, usually because of the overall cost going forward. But I'll pause for any questions on this particular slide.
In the new fire station, a public state, is the indoor range, is there one going to be in both those buildings?
No, ma'am. The only indoor range is at Fire Station 2. Fire Station 3, which until Fire Station 1 opens is the newest fire station, does not have that component. We really only need one indoor fire station. We don't need multiple ones. Right. And that's strictly at Fire Station 2.
But is it usable for the police now at Fire Station 2?
I've been out there when they've gone through qualifications, Councilwoman, and they've got this, the rail system where you put the targets up and you slide them back. Those things have a tendency to jam. The technology that runs them is older than their 911 software, and so that stuff's not working pretty well. So that's going to have to get upgraded at some point in time, preferably sooner rather than later.
And where do our police practice?
Well, they practice depending on the kind of
outdoor range or something they use.
I'll defer to Chief on their outdoor range usage.
They do. There's an outdoor range in Richmond County and Aiken County that they can practice on. But basically, that's for qualifications. What's at Station 2, and obviously there's some maintenance that need to be done. There's a bullet trap that needs some attention. So, yeah, it's an antiquated system. It certainly is.
Subject to any questions on this slide, we'll go to another slide. This is also along the same veins of the kinds of projects that are requested but are not in the base budget for this year. I won't read these all to you, but you can see there is a long list of PRT items, and what I have listed onto there is, if these may be funded in future general fund, but they could also be funded in ARPA. The previous ARPA requests that we've brought to the council were very infrastructure heavy and also public safety heavy. We did not bring any PRT items minus a very small amount to the table. So ultimately, if the council wants to move any of these projects, up on the list, so to speak, through an ARPA disbursement, that would be a way to do it. And I'll take your guidance, directly through the mayor. But those are items that are not able to be outfitted in this year's general budget.
I'll just say, at our public power hour, we had a number of folks come and talk about the need for a shade structure over the playground. So I'll just throw out, in my opinion, I think council will agree, that would be one I think we ought to consider for the ARPA funding when that's appropriate, and you guide us when that is. But like Jim said, if you will, as y'all think through that, kind of email me that information, and then I can get that to Jim. But that'd be one that just, in my mind, I think we ought to consider.
The other one I would add to that list, I agree with that, would be the lights for the new soccer field, if we could put that up, because that is probably, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the most popular sport. And, you know, when I coached a year ago, I mean, it's slam packed. I mean, they're running out of fields, and especially during the fall, they lose the ability to use Lions Field. I don't think, does San Salvador still have lights? Are we still using that? But, you know, they lost that field. You know, that's one I grew up playing on by the waterworks, and they lost it for a couple years. So, yeah, if we could move that up, I think that would be very helpful.
Yes,
I hate to
Councilman.
say they're gonna lose it again, because the Miracle League is going there. Well, I mean, that's the San Salvador you're talking about, right?
Jim, what got me when I was thinking about looking at these, on the first slide, if you go back to the previous slide, those items, the ladder truck, and those items, I think this would be a good time for administration that I think we ought to look at setting up a retreat. I'm thinking sometime in February, and like we did before about growth, and specifically what I think would be very helpful to us is just like you've listed items that the staff is saying, hey, these are things we need to know happen. I think we all are aware of the growth that's happening. And it's not all going to happen tomorrow, but Highland Springs is moving along. So for council, what we need to have is a retreat where staff comes to us, and I'm making up a number, so out there listing citizens, I'm not saying this for list, I'm making up a number for a point. If we have 1,000 new households, does that mean we need a new sanitation truck? Does that mean we need 2 PSOs? But we're at that point that, you know, we're getting through this budget due to the issues we're dealing with. But I think going forward, this council is ready to start looking at planning. What does that look like moving forward in the next 5 and 10 years? Are we in agreement with that? So as administration, y'all can look into that, and just this might be a good way to segue into me telling you that's what I'm saying.
Mr. Mayor, I acknowledge your tasking.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if we email you, Mr. Mayor, of some of these projects, because they're here not funded, so even though we email you, does that mean they won't be considered for this budget coming, or 2024?
Well,
I mean, because people are really concerned with the shade.
What we're talking about
Riverview
is
Park.
using, these are, what Ms. Clifford is saying is, these are not available for this budget, but it may be something we can use our ARPA. We still have ARPA money.
Oh, okay, so
That's
that's
what
why
I'm
we're
saying.
emailing.
Yes,
Okay,
that's what I'm
okay.
saying, yeah.
I'm sorry, I
No, that's
misunderstood.
okay, that's all right. All right, go ahead.
Next slide, please. Rick will probably be able to talk this a lot better, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of our updated fees for PRT and through a couple of other departments. What we've really tried to do is hold the line for seniors, so we're not monkeying around with those fee structures significantly, but really for the out-of-city fee structure will go up somewhat for the activity center, and then also somewhat for the in-city personnel. But if Rick wants to answer questions on that, I will turn it over to him from a fee perspective.
Good evening. On the Activity Center, what we've done for in-city residents is we've just bumped up $5 for individuals and $10 for families. So not extensive, but if you've kept up with supply and demand, and this is going to bleed down to the athletic programs as well, the cost of doing business is much higher today, and we're trying the best we can to hold the line, but we've got to increase a little bit if we're going to keep up with the demands that we have. So, and one of those in the activity center, besides the big ticket items, is just trying to keep up with our exercise equipment, cardio equipment, being able to provide repairs and provide new equipment. And we haven't been doing too much of that through COVID, and it's time we need to do that.
What's our out-of-city increase for that?
Out-of-city increase is $10 an individual and $20 a family.
Is that sufficient?
Well,
We got people who come over here and they join because it's nothing.
yeah, no question. No, yeah.
Well, and I know this, I mean, you could sit here, but if anybody wanted to see what a value you're getting, go look at what the Y cost a year for their sports programs, for, just to be a member there. I mean, this is still probably cheap and the best deal you're going to find anywhere in the area.
I think it's a great deal that shows we care about our citizens and we keep the fees low enough so everybody can participate.
How about outer-city citizens?
Well, they are addressed in out-of-city fees.
True, and again, in the youth athletic programs, we bumped $5 on in-city and out-of-city, and we also, what's not shown on the slide is we're going to, for the first time in 20-plus years, we're going to go up a little bit on our sponsorship fees as well. We've been $250 per team forever, and Bob can agree with that.
Well,
So
I
we're
know
gonna-
myself.
Yeah, we're going to go up to $300 on that, and then if it's a league fee, which was $500, we're going to go to $600 to try to generate some more revenue there.
Well, what about, Rick, out of state versus out of city? I mean, we're talking these people right outside the city limits, but these that are coming from Evans, I mean, why don't we have a fee for out of state as well?
We used to have an out-of-state fee.
Yeah, I thought we
and
did.
Yeah, and actually, when, as far as activity center was concerned, it actually helped us not to
Oh,
be
really?
so strong because the out-of-state memberships are not that great. I think we were kind of turning them off. We were so high, and a little bit out-of-state membership doesn't hurt when you're trying to get your numbers up.
I've never heard anybody say they joined that did not see value. I mean,
Right.
it's the best value we offer.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's just not a big deal.
I mean, even if you use the exercise equipment, I mean, like if you go for membership to Gold's or any of these other places, I mean, you're going to spend more than what you would for, as much as you would for a family for a single. And I mean, it really is a great value. I just, I know people are going to complain, oh, we're going up, but I mean, this is still probably one of the best values. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anything better anywhere in the CSRA.
Yes, Councilman. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Rick.
No disappear yet, because we're going to talk about the rates for the renting the Palmetto Terrace and the community center. Those are, again, some additional fees associated with that, but just wanted to advertise that for the council to see what those fees would be.
Are these rates still compatible with the community? Rick?
That's okay. I need it. Yeah. To answer that question, Bob, I think absolutely, because if you look at the revenues coming in for the community center in 2022, you'll see significant increase, and we've still got a few months to go. In fact, the figure you're looking at maybe in your book, just shows you through July, but we've turned in some good revenue from the community center and since July. So yes, we're not getting any blowback from folks on these rates.
Well, that says a lot right there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bob, I just had my 40-year high school reunion here on Saturday.
All right.
And I will tell you, when the folks who are looking for a facility, there really just aren't a lot of facilities that host it. And I'm going to tell you that you have people from all over the country coming, and I mean, I can't tell you how impressed they were with our municipal center of the Palmetto Ring. Derek Boyd did an amazing job setting up. So I think it's an amazing value, and I think there's a big need for this space. So.
Next slide, please. So we are going to have an increase in sanitation fees. What I'd like to do is turn this over to Rachel Moody to talk a little bit about kind of that structure, and then Linda can also chime in on the overall rate structures for sanitation.
So the sanitation fund has, of course, some of the same struggles that the general fund has. All of the employees within the sanitation fund were also subject to the 18% PIBA increase. We have the COLA built in there as well. So just like most of the budgets in the general fund had some pretty significant hits, so did the sanitation services fund, and there's fewer resources available to help to overcome that. since the fire last November, we've not been able to collect commingled recycling from anyone outside of city limits. So for our city residents, we've still continued to pick up the single stream solid waste and recycling together. We did have a company who was on contract who would bring to us, and it was a source of revenue for us. Just simply because of the volume that they would bring, we've not been able to keep that contract. Currently, we are only accepting contracts with people who are bringing clean recyclables. As we move forward and rebuild our MRF, we are only going to be able to bring in the clean recycling again. So it is not likely that we will bring this prior customer back on unless they are to separate their solid waste from their recycling. So with the loss of that particular contract, that is a decrease in revenue that we have. With that said, we do anticipate being able to most likely increase the revenue over what we have budgeted because Aiken County is bringing their recyclables back to us again. They had some difficulties with their own budget last year, and they couldn't bring their recyclables to us for a period of time because they couldn't pay the tipping fee. As we move forward, North Augusta residents will still be able to receive the curbside solid waste and recycling pickup. The increase is about $1.77 per month for solid waste and recycling pickup curbside. In future meetings, including in the next few weeks, we plan to have a study session where we'll talk in a little bit more in depth about what the future of solid waste and recycling is going to look like. As you remember, last Monday, you all approved the expenditure for the new building to go. And then, of course, next Monday, we will have a resolution for you all to approve the new equipment that will go inside the building. So we're slowly getting there. We're able to do all of this using the proceeds from the insurance money from the fire, so we're very fortunate for that. We're not seeing any rate increases directly related to purchasing of new items for the facilities.
I know this will probably be answered in the next study session you were talking about, but with the rebuilding, are we rebuilding it with more capacity in mind, or is it pretty much what we had before?
In terms of throughput, we are definitely building at minimum for the throughput of recycling that we've been able to handle. The goal, of course, is to start where we are, but build so that we can expand into the future. We've taken a really hard look at where we are now, where we'll be once we have all of the development come to fruition. James and his crews review the same reports that, planning and development reviews as well. And there's real opportunities for us in the future as we grow and expand to use automation, robots for recycling separation. It's much more efficient, and we'll be able to recover more recyclables and then sell more recyclables. So starting out, fully functional with recycling, with physical room to grow.
Rachel, can I ask you one question, please? And this is more in the narrative write-up, and I know this was preliminary that got sent out, but there was a comment about the budgets proposed includes the deletion of 3 employee positions from the material recovery facility. What did that save us? Tell me a little bit about that.
So it's interesting, that word is a bit of a misnomer. Okay. We did not lay anyone off. We have retained all of our employees. I do want to make that very clear. At the time of the fire, we had a few other positions that were open. And sanitation is one section and recycling is the other, of course. They're all underneath the umbrella of the same department. So those 3 positions, those individuals were moved over into open FTE positions, and then we were able to remove those 3 FTEs from the MRF budget. So there is a savings there. I'm happy to report we've retained all of those employees. They're all quite happy in the positions that they're in now. As we rebuild the MRF, we will not need to add any new FTEs. I do believe we went up on one temp worker. This year, I think we'll have 3 now this year. But to Eric's point, as we rebuild and as we're able to take advantage of automation and robots with recycling, it is a very good chance that we'll be able to maintain our MRF. It'll be a clean MRF with straight recyclables only without having to add FTEs. This is a huge change from where we've been that was very labor intensive and labor heavy. Thank you. I will say the restructuring of those individuals and elimination of those FTEs from the budget is really what has allowed us to maintain this year's budget, the expenditures versus revenues, because we have had a decrease in the revenues, and it's what's allowing us to be able to move into this next year without a much more significant increase. So big kudos to our department from looking internally and restructuring and finding efficiencies.
Thank you, Rachel. Next slide, please. I'll just touch on this very briefly, just so to refresh the council and our citizens, but there will be no change on wastewater fees. So that is as it is. Next slide, please. And then same for water fees. Those water fees will remain unchanged. So we're trying to balance this out with, understanding that some fees will change and we're trying to balance it out with other fees that will not.
Do we have any more information of how things look? I know last year you informed us that I believe one of our large, Edgefield County has a customer that will be transitioning away from using our ability, and I was just curious where we stand as far as, are we able to predict anything with that future budget? Is that something I just wondering, or is that
I'll kick that to Rachel.
out for another session?
I think you're referring to wastewater. On the wastewater
Yes.
side, Saluda is building, that's right, Saluda County is building their own treatment facility, and when that comes online fully, Edgefield County will come off, which is currently a revenue to us. I'd have to check with James to see what he has heard about that status.
We don't know when that will be.
Thank you, James. All right. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what the impacts are on our residents and citizens. So as we talked about before, there's going to be a sanitation rate increase, which will most likely be seen at the $1.77 rate for in-city residents. We're going to see some PRT fees increase to a small degree. And then in order to balance this budget for the $296,000 PIBA costs along with the COLA and fuel costs, we're requesting a 1.5 mil property tax increase in this fiscal year in 2023. What we're not increasing on our citizens is fire protection fees, water service charges, or wastewater service charges. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what 1.5 mils look like for a average citizen here in the city of North Augusta. And so if you take a roughly $200,000 home, the tax increase will be $12 a year for those citizens, and it shows the cost on vehicles for brand new vehicles, not older vehicles, would be approximately 3 to 3.25 for a 21 or 22 model year vehicle going out there. So for the mayor on his 8-year-old Toyota, probably not quite that much, but for folks rocking new cars, that'll be a few dollars more.
Drive it till you can't drive it anymore.
So what I'd like to, while on the slide, just talk a few things. One, I've heard some discussion about Riverside Village and overall tax rates here in the city. What I really want to be able to kind of convey to the council and also to our citizens is that the structure that you see before you, which is all resident in the books that we have here for the council, is that these are tied directly to the general fund and also only go to the items that we've discussed here tonight on the slides. The Riverfront Central Core is an account that we use to fund the debt service payments that we have for Riverside Village, and we have the next several debt service payments in the Riverfront Central Core Fund to pay, and so there is no requirement by the city to increase millage to do anything in relation to Riverside Village. This is strictly to do the business of the city. And if you look at a number of other municipalities, that a raise of 1 to 1.5 mils a year is pretty standard across the board. It's not something that the city has done over the long term, but in order to meet inflationary pressures on the budget, that's kind of the norm across most other municipalities. So again, this is to meet the baseline requirements within the general fund, not to fund additional aspects.
Jim, just a couple quick questions. Since Riverside Village is doing better than anticipated, could we use some of that money towards the general budget, or no?
I would not recommend that, Councilman. I think that as we mature the Riverside Village concept, we will be able to use H&A tax for other aspects of quality of life here within the city, which is how I think you see a lot of our sister communities doing that. And I think we're moving in that direction pretty well, but I would not recommend mixing the general fund and the Riverfront Central Core.
Okay. And the other question would be, and again, I've only been on here, this is my 4th year. How long has it been since we've had a millage increase, or have we in any recent times?
You had a millage increase, I believe, in 2018, Councilman, that was implemented by former mayor and council, and then this would be the next millage increase.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So actually, I'll talk one other item, and then I'll go into kind of the guidance that I'm requesting from council tonight as well. So one is to kind of beat you to the punch about some of the items here in your budget book. You've got 4 separate funds listed under capital project sales tax, 1 through 4. And the council this year has approved resolutions that will allow us to move forward on a number of those capital project sales tax. So if you look at capital project sales tax 1, council passed a resolution allowing us to move forward on the replacement of the Greenway Bridge. Tom Zieser's working that project now and has ordered the replacement bridge. And so what I would tell you is that the next annual meeting of this, where I'll be coming forward to the council in October in 2023, that CPST1 fund will be completely closed out. So you'll still see money in CPST1 today, but we are moving forward on those actions to close out that fund. So by the next fiscal year, budget preparation will be closed out on CPST1. Likewise, CPST2 will be closed out because of council action moving forward on the Smart Cop 911 dispatch software for public safety. So those funds will be allocated early next year to close out that project, and we'll also close out CPST2. That will leave us with CPST3. We have 2 major projects moving forward now under CPST3. One is the closeout of Fire Station 1, which is still under construction on Martintown Road. And then the other project is also a Tom Zieser project, which is the Greenway extension up to Mayfield Drive. So as we get better financials on those 2 projects, that will inform us of how close we are to closing out CPST3, but I suspect we'll be pretty close at that point in time. And then lastly, because of our initiatives moving forward with the public safety headquarters, we'll have a better sense at the next budget study session in October of 2023 of what our burn rate is for CPSD4, because we'll know what the cost of the public safety headquarters is going to be, along with the Bluff Avenue connector.
That's good. Thank you, Jim.
So with all that having said, one of the things that you see in the budget is that we are starting to set aside $200,000 a year as per our agreement in the Riverfront Central Core for the Stadium Improvement Fund, which is to be administered and overseen by the Stadium Advisory Board, which is a mixture of city personnel, elected officials, and the Augusta Green Jackets. And so in this current budget, we have $200,000 set aside out of the Riverfront Central Core for the Stadium Improvement Fund. But my intention is to come to council this year with another ARPA request, and that would be to prepay 3 years' worth of Stadium Improvement Fund to the tune of $600,000, with the intention of using that money to pay down or pay for Major League Baseball requirements across all stadiums that are within the Major League Baseball umbrella. And so specifically for our stadium, there is a requirement by Major League Baseball to increase the lights, so keeping the existing light towers, if you will, but adding additional lights to those, and then also a requirement for a female locker room that would handle the umpires and trainers for the Green Jackets. And so those are two elements that are going to have to be implemented in a fairly short amount of time. One of those has to be in by the 23 season. I think the other one has to be in by the 24 season. So if at the rate that we're putting money into the Stadium Improvement Fund, we will not have enough money to make those Major League Baseball requirement changes to the stadium. And so what I would ask then is to move forward on an ARPA distribution for that purpose. If that is the agreement of the council, or if the council so agrees, we'll remove $200,000 out of the, from a transfer, if you will, from the Riverfront Central Core into the Stadium Improvement Fund at this time before we go back to a first ordinance reading. If the council decides that and then they choose not to fund with ARPA, I would have to come back with another resolution to allocate money out of the Riverfront Central Core to the Stadium Improvement Fund. There's a lot of talking in acronyms, but I'll turn it back over
What's
to
the
y'all.
dollar amount again you said?
So each year, the city is required to set aside $200,000 by the agreement that we have for the stadium.
We did 200 last year,
We did. We did $200,000 out of the Riverfront Central Core last year.
200 this year.
Correction, we did, last year you approved the budget, which has $200,000 in it, so this year is the first year of $200,000 being set aside for the Stadium Improvement Fund in FY '22.
And so the other 400 come from the ARPA.
I would request 3 years' worth, so $600,000. So that would pay for fiscal years '23, '24, and '25. I would not request $200,000 to be set into the Stadium Improvement Fund from the Riverfront Central Core for those 3 years.
Jim?
Yes.
I noticed a few folks looking, it's the Public Facilities Corporation, not,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Jim, if we prepay for these funds, is there going to be improvements down the line that we would have to find resourcing for, since we're committed to 3 years of improvements?
That's certainly a possibility. But I'm trying to deal, I hate to say it, I'm trying to deal with the today problem. Some of the money for the Stadium Improvement Fund is to do things like fix concrete cracks, grind some of the metal stairways and repaint them. And I think we can still afford to do a lot of the kind of the cosmetic things that go along with the maintenance on the facility. I think the reason why you're having us doing $200,000 a year, per the agreement, and Kelly can talk this probably more intelligent than I can, is really for the bigger items that we're going to come up down the line based on long-term maintenance. But I think this is a prudent investment. We're going to have to do it to be in compliance with Major League Baseball.
And it still gives us flexibility we'll still have ARPA money available.
Yes, sir. We still have ARPA money available.
Thank you.
Jim, or I don't know if this is a Rachel or a finance question. I know I asked this a few years ago when Cammie was still here. With the stadium, have we got to the point where we can pay down on it more than what we're supposed to try to, decrease the interest that we pay? Have we reached that point yet?
I think the answer is no, Councilman. I think the other part of that is just the cost of borrowing money is significantly becoming greater, and the cost of borrowing money at the time that the stadium went forward was at, I don't want to say historic lows, but certainly at a very low point. And so I think when you look very broadly at the cost-benefit analysis of, borrowing more money at a higher rate versus letting your kind of low-rate mortgage ride, I'm at least of the opinion today that we're still in a better place to let the current mortgage that we have for the the debt to continue to move at the rate that it is.
I mean, I guess I was just saying, if, let's say we ended up over the course of the next 2 years and we've got 6 years worth of payments ready, could we pay down on it in theory? Or would that be a smart thing to do?
I would probably want to bring in not just Kelly, but also our outside counsel and also Walter Goldsmith, who's our bond counsel, to really get everybody around that problem to see if that's advisable for the city or not.
Thanks.
Do you need any comment from us to give you consensus to prepare the resolution tonight? Agreement with what you're proposing, or is that later?
Well, I think the first thing, Mr. Mayor, is just to know whether or not the council is amenable to us removing the $200,000 out of the Riverfront Central Core, for the Stadium Improvement Fund or not. And then that will at least allow me to move forward on a future action for ARPA. So the question then to the council is, do you want me to remove the $200,000 out of the Riverfront Central Core with the proviso that I'm going to come forward with an ARPA request for a Stadium Improvement Fund?
We're not voting, but in general, we're in agreement with that? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Next slide, please. All right, well, you've heard a lot from me and from a couple of our staff members. What I would like to do at this point in time is to open up the floor to Mayor and Council. If you have specific questions based on the budget binders that were provided to you, we're happy to take your questions at this time. And as the Mayor had alluded to, you'll be getting an updated intro from me, a verbal or written product, if you will, based on the slides that you have to kind of more in-depth talk about some of the things that we talked about this evening. So subject to that, I will turn this over back to Mayor and Council for questions, and we're prepared for your questions at this time.
I'll just jump in first. Just a couple things. I was just curious. It talked about the public safety, the decline in fines. Why? What's going to cause that? I'm just curious.
I'll defer to Chief, but I'll.
It says fines and forfeitures down 14% decrease. I'm just curious, why do we think that's going to happen?
Well, I think there's a couple factors there, Mr. Mayor, but I'll take a stab at it, and Chief will probably jump in as well, which is, we've had some personnel turnover in public safety, and so ultimately some of those officers have been tied up with training both on the Police and Fire Academy, and then also we've been doing an awful lot of work with the stadium, and as far as doing a lot of extra details for the Green Jackets. All that having been said, Chief is aware of our current level of fines, and his team is working that now to get that back into kind of a normal model, if you will, going forward. But we didn't want to over budget either for those funds because I didn't want to tie our fortunes, if you will, to traffic tickets about whether we had the ability to do kind of base functions within the city. But if Chief Thomas had anything else you wanted to add, feel free.
No, sir. I think, a lot of it has to do with resources and, the retention of officers who left us to go elsewhere. We kind of backfill those. We took some off of traffic detail to put them back on the shift. So it's taken a toll this last year.
And I'm asked this question. This is strictly to educate me because you probably have done this before. I can't remember what this is. This is state shared revenue. It's in the aid to subdivisions, sub 571,000, then another 70,000 for a manufacturer's exemption program. I know we talked about this last year. I'm sure. I just cannot recall what that is. Do we know what that is?
I'm going to punt that over to.
Well, it's in the write-up, but it's basically page 4 under General Fund Summary of Revenues. It says it's other sources. So from other sources includes primary state shared revenue in the form of aid to subdivisions. and I just cannot recall what that is.
I can answer that.
Thank you.
The aid to subdivision is the dispersion of the local government fund. The state of South Carolina has a mathematical equation of funding that's provided to the various municipalities based on population, et cetera, municipal association, and their advocates advocate every year during the state budget process to ensure that the local government fund, which is the aid to subdivisions, is fully funded, if not increased. It's just another supplemental way to provide funding to our municipalities.
Okay, so we call it aid to subdivision, but basically it's just another funding source for us.
Yes, revenue from the state.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And then the last thing I had is more of just maybe a recommendation for a future study session. Would be, I think it would be good to maybe have a study session as far as to give the administration time concerning under the capital projects fund. I know we have a number of unused restricted funds, and I don't know what the rules are about how we can free those unused restricted funds up. But is that maybe a study session topic that would fall under?
We can certainly do that. We can unencumber funds that are still tied to old projects that are completed. Right. We can either do that via one-offs by resolution, as the time comes up, or we can wrap it up into this budget so you approve all of them at once, but we can definitely discuss. There are some projects that are fully closed out that probably should be unencumbered. Yeah. There are others that we can talk about the importance as to why they're still encumbered.
No rush on that, but something I think we ought to just talk at some point. Thank you. That's really all I've got.
I have a question. Jim, why are we charging the arts and heritage rent? Do you know?
I don't know. I thought they were not subject to rent at this time.
We're taking it from the.
Yeah, we're not
charging them.
We're not charging them. In lieu of receiving rent from the Arts and Heritage Center, we pay ourselves utilizing hospitality tax, tourism money.
Oh, so you're just moving funds from one to the other?
That's correct.
That indicates what we would be getting for revenue if we had a paying tenant.
Well, that's true, because I remember when they first went in, they were charged a rental fee, and that wasn't a right thing to do. So it was moved to another source of funding. And going back to the capital projects fund, we've had money in there for Sunset Hills Cemetery, which is $46,486. And if I recall correctly, that was put in there for a citywide garden to be put on those 4 acres that are undeveloped in there. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. And also to do paving of the roads in there. Need to determine what we're going to do with that $46,000 for Sunset Hill Cemetery.
Councilman, I think that's something we could certainly wrap into the future study session about the capital projects fund.
Sure, that's good. And before I finish this, I know you're proposing a 1.5 mil increase. I would like to propose a 2 mil increase with the additional funding going to the capital projects fund, that $0.5 mil, and I believe that would get us very close to 2 mils that goes directly to the capital projects fund, which we've been trying to get the last 3 years. And we're not there yet, so that would be my recommendation.
And I agree with Bob.
Councilman Brooks, 3.3 mils go into the capital projects fund currently.
Yes.
So it would,
I still would like to see it go into the capital.
sure, okay, so it would be 3.8.
And the way I look at this, we bragged for 25 years at no increase, which that was a good pat on the back for this council. But in my heart, sometime, instead of getting ourselves in trouble, you know, gradually go up a little bit, that really doesn't hurt people, but yet provides so much more for this city. And so, like I said, I was there those 25 years, and like I said, we patted ourselves on the back that, and then all of a sudden, 2018, we go to struggling a little bit, where we'd have gradually gone up. And like I said, one of the main thing too is for our employees and to keep people here who we want to stay here, and other things in our city that we, and one more question.
Let me just interrupt real quick.
Okay.
Just understand, Mr. Brooks is wanting a $500,000 increase to go into the capital projects. So has nothing to do with employees or anything else. Okay, I just want to make sure you talk about employees.
But my point is over the 25 years,
I agree with
I think that really hurt us not to go up. You know, now I don't say go up 10 or 12, that's gonna knock everybody off their feet, but I think when citizens see, and especially with capital projects, but if a big project comes up and we stuck,
Well, I
So-
think we did make a good statement last year because, you know, we did reiterate we increased the capital projects last year because it had not been increased. And I think that is being a good steward of your resources. So we are able to fund that. So I just want to make sure you two are on the same page.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I know higher taxes is not favorable by anybody, but, you know, we did, like Pat said, for 20-something years, never raised a millage rate. And I still challenge anybody. I mean, nobody likes tax increases. Unfortunately, it is something we have to look at. But I still maintain that, you know, if you take the average $200,000 house, we're probably half as much as Richmond County and a third of Columbia County. Now, again, they've got more people, more businesses. I understand that. But I still feel like we have a value for what we pay for our taxes here. I know, Jim, I think you said your parents live in New Jersey and they're paying $20,000 plus a year, you know. So as much as we don't like it, I think most people will understand. I had a conversation with somebody I used to coach with. You know, he said, look, Eric, if it's got to go up because we live in a great place, but, you know, we need the extra money to fix, you know, the fields, the sports equipment, you know, the greenway, all of these things. I know it's not a popular idea, but, you know, again, and Pat and Bob, y'all have been on here, David, y'all been on here a lot longer than me, but, you know, especially with inflation and, you know, some of the things we're seeing, I could support what Bob and Pat are doing as well, the $500,000.
who would answer this? Going up to 2 mills, what would that, off the top of your head, how much, like on the house and the cars? You know, we said the tax increase would be about $12.
Well, Mills
Or,
about
I'm sorry, Linda.
40,000.
Huh. Well, I mean, I want to see it, like, this is a good thing right here.
Mills about 140,000.
Yeah.
So half a mill's about 60. So you're probably talking about
It would increase it to,
So,
a couple of dollars.
it'll increase it to $16.
16,
Yes, ma'am.
$16.
Councilman President, I'd also like to state for the record, I've not lived anywhere north of Virginia since 1994.
Well, comments from this side?
I guess my first initial thought with that, I guess the $500,000 to the capital projects fund would be, if we put it into that, do we still have enough staffing in each department to actually complete all this projects that are getting put out there? So I think that putting it into one fund could also negate another fund because we need more staff to complete the projects. And then I thought Mayor Williams made a good point about seeing about this capital projects fund. it looks like there's a good bit of money there that still needs to kind of get, I guess, filtered out and seeing where we can put into that into a different area for that zone.
That's correct, ma'am.
Just my initial thoughts on your comment.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I mean, I'm, echo probably a lot of what was already said. I'm not exactly thrilled at the prospect of having to have a mill increase, but I think it's explainable. It's for the purposes that it ought to be, which is primarily for taking care of the people that keep the city going. And so, I will support that. The half mil increase, Bob, I'm going to have to that one kind of caught me not off guard, but it's not something I've given any thought to, and I guess my only hesitation with that is, though it wasn't a millage increase last year with property tax and us holding the millage, I mean, there was at least a net cost increase to our citizens as part of that process, and I'm not so sure. I think if 1.5 can kind of get our needs done at this point, I think I'd be a little hesitant to do another half mil going into the capital projects fund. But it's something I'd need to think about a little bit more. Certainly support the overall goals of this budget. I think it's conservatively done. It does exactly what it states it ought to do, which is continues to provide a high level of service to our citizens for a good value. I agree 100% with Eric on that, and at least moves us in the right direction to keep us competitive. Doesn't get us there, but it moves us in the right direction to keep us competitive from a staffing standpoint. So, just overall, I think it's well done. Really have no significant issues with it. I certainly support it as presented. I'd have to give the additional increase some thought, but have no issues with it as presented.
So what does that look like? So what would be, how does that work the next step if we've got, what does that mean? Do we need to have,
What I would view, and I would defer to Kelly or Linda on the mechanics of this, but my understanding would be is if the council provided guidance tonight and said either tonight or at a future date that you were interested in a additional outlay into the capital projects fund, that's a fairly easy change for us to make because it doesn't filter through the whole rest of the budget. We could change the model there from 1.5 mils to 2 mils and then just take the difference, if you will, between the 1.5 to 2 and just goes all directly into capital projects fund. But we would need to do that prior to coming back before the first ordinance reading here with the council.
I could support that half mil increase for the capital projects, but I guess without having to redo the whole budget, I guess can we get a preliminary review of what that would look like?
I don't think we have to redo the whole budget. I mean, all we're doing is if it's going to the capital projects, that's not a set project. That's just earmarked. So it's just a matter of, the way I look at it, as a council, do we want to do it? It doesn't change this except instead of 1.5, it's going to say 2, and we just earmark what we did last year.
Yeah. Well, could we
So it doesn't change anything, with other 1.5, it doesn't change anything else in the budget.
Could we maybe get a list of some of the projects that it could help fund in the near future if we did that? Would that be possible, Jim?
It's $60,000.
Yeah.
So again, if we do it, when we did it last year, the thought process was, because we had not increased it in a number of years,
Right.
we needed to be good stewards, start putting our money back in to our projects so we're not so dependent on outside sources.
Correct.
Right.
So again, in my opinion, if we're going to do that again with this 0.5%, I think that amount is, I don't think a project makes sense. I mean, 60,000, I think it's just a matter of, are we continuing what we started last year, that we want to continue to be good stewards? Is how I look at it. So
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, but
Right.
60,000 is not, I think that's irrelevant to a project. It's just a matter
Correct.
of, as a council, do we agree that we want to do it again this year? And I think that's the decision.
If
So
I
we're
may.
not voting on that now. We have to vote on that.
Right.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. This would be strictly guidance to the staff for us to amend or alter, but I'm sorry. Rick, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt. You actually only have about a day to make that decision. If you refer to the budget calendar, we have to publish our public hearing notice about the budget where we list the proposed millage for the upcoming year. According to the calendar, that's September 29th. Yeah, effectively, we would need it to know probably by what, end of the day tomorrow. We have the standard template of what we submit. So we would just need to adjust the number. So probably by the end of the day tomorrow, we need to know.
And again, if you put that in that, we've changed it to 2 mil, again, we're not voting on that. It still has to come to a vote. We're still going to have public comment. So, I mean, theoretically, you could put it in there, and then when we vote, we could change. So the issue.
Absolutely.
Well, you just need to know from us, do we need to increase it? So I think I'm
That's right.
hearing, we're not voting on it, but as far as if you need to put it in there, I say put it in there. Because if we don't, we can't go back.
Yeah,
We're
I'd
not
like,
voting on it, we're not approving it, we could turn that down and make another motion when we actually vote. Am I
Makes
correct
sense.
on that?
I'd like to see that
Okay.
done that way so we can
And we don't-
decide at a later
We don't vote on
date.
that, so I think there's a consensus.
Because we did commit to increasing the capital project
So we don't
funds.
need all 7 of us to agree to that. We have consensus that at least put it in there. We want to increase it to 2, and then we'll go from there.
And we still got to have the hearings and the meetings.
Oh, yeah.
And
And-
you know, like Kevin said, give you some time to mull over it and, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
That help you?
That help?
Okay, very good. Wow. Okay. What a way to end the meeting. All right, anything on your end?
Barring any questions from council, what I would like to say is I'd like to thank the directors and our senior managers for, again, carrying the load and helping me build this product here today. And also specifically like to thank some of our newest members on the team in their roles, both Linda Williamson as our interim finance director and Jamie Paul as the city clerk, have really been able to hop into this process and be value added right out of the gate. And I'm grateful for the team that I get to represent here today. So thanks to council for hearing us out. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have, subject to I think you have to read something for an executive session later on tonight.
Yeah, I will. But I would just, only comment I want to make, I felt good about last year when we looked at preparing this budget, but I really feel good about what you presented to us. I thank council for your questions. I think very good questions. Thank you, staff, for answering. I think we gave a lot of information for citizens. Again, we are going to have that hour. It'll be posted, of course. We're going to have an hour public versus 30 minutes on October 17th. So anyway, no more conversation about that. And then what I'm going to ask is, I'll read this. In compliance with section 30-4-70, the mayor requests an executive session for the purpose of discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements, a proposed sale or purchase of property, the receipt of legal advice where the legal advice relates to a pending, threatened, or potential claim or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims, or the position of the public agency and other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a claim. This is discussion specifically related to operations associated with Riverside Village development. I ask for a motion to go into executive session. Do I have a motion? Mr. Brooks, is there a second? Ms. Carpenter? Okay, there's no discussion, so all in favor? That is unanimous, Ms. Paul. And we stand adjourned, all right? We won't be coming back. Yeah, we won't be coming back, nothing will be reported. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.